Hey, what's up, guys? I want to welcome you back to another episode of Street Theology, episode 28. The Work Done episode.
Hey.
The Work Done episode today. The title of our episode today is Started from the Bottom, Now We Are Here. This is birthday week here at Engage. Again, Engage turns 8, and we are excited about today's episode. Again, I want to encourage you guys, as you are listening to this, don't forget, Friday we have the experience. Make sure you get signed up. It's our night of worship as well. This Sunday, again, 9 and 11 at our in-person location. Again, wear your favorite Engage gear. We are really excited about this week. Again, Engage turning 8. And so because we are turning 8, we are actually going to talk about really the history and a lot about Engage. I think it's very important and to do that. So I am joined today by 3 incredible people. First, I am joined by Kara Young. Kara has been, and you guys know Kara. She's up on stage, helps lead worship, is our storytelling architect. Kara, what's happening?
What's up? Happy to be here.
Glad to be here. And man, we are joined by a new staff member. Hey. We are joined by a new staff member today. Man, Pastor Jamie Robinson. Hey, hailing from South Carolina.
Hey, man, I'm just finally glad that I got opportunity to get on here.
Get on the pod. You know what I'm saying? Your wife was on the pod.
She got on the pod before me, man.
You know what I'm saying?
Dang. What do I got to do? I got to come work here to get on the pod? Obviously.
Hey, man. And so we're excited to get Pastor Jamie. He's our financial architect and also an associate pastor here. And man, joining us, and she is living fully South Florida, our former, which breaks my heart, our former experienced architect, pretty much person who had almost every job in this church, literally almost every job in this church, Dena Landers. Yeah, except for mine, which again, you could have taken that and I would have happily given it to you. But anyway, to Dena Landers. Dena, what's happening?
Living the dream,
You are living the dream. So, Dena, really quick, before we dive in today, let the people know, again, you were such a integral part here at Engage from the inception of Engage. Actually, what you're doing now, again, you and your family moved back down to South Florida. So let the people be updated right now of what you're actually doing.
I am in straight survival mode all the time.
So nothing's changed.
My children, I'm pretty sure, are trying to kill me. I was updating my resume and I put hostage negotiation on there because that feels like my life.
Facts.
My 2-year-old, to get him to put on pants, I need to give him 5 cookies and sing him the ABCs upside down to get him to do anything. So
shout out to young lady.
Life is really fun for us right now. It's awesome. Definitely taking a break from the grind that I was used to at Engage, and using that time to really focus it on our family. And it's been a blessing and a joy for us. So
awesome.
Tired, but enjoying it.
It's awesome. And then again, I know something that's super, super important to you always is always to be by family. So it's really exciting that you're back home. Again, aren't you right around the corner? Really very close, right? Very close to your family?
Yeah. We're 6 houses down from my parents, which that's, we can talk about that offline, but it's been great. It's been really good. You can interview my husband about it later, but
yeah, well, I know it is. That's definitely a 2-sided coin right there. You know what I'm saying? That's a gift and a curse. You know what I'm saying? Free babysitting, and parental
free life
issues. And childhood memories. But anyway, we are excited today. And again, guys, as we are turning, it's amazing. The fact that Engage is turning 8. There was it was the OG 18 that started with us. It was 18 of us with $10,000 in the living room, with Wendy and I living room, and a group of people just said, hey, we really believe that God wants to use us to see people engage one another, in deep, meaningful relationship, and idea to be able to engage culture. And it's been a wild ride to watch what God has done here at Engage. So today, really, we're going to walk through a little bit of the history. Again, Pastor Jamie was a part of the original OG 18. Dena was a part of the original OG 18. And so we're kind of going to walk through. And Kara, again, has been a part of our group. She was not a part, but she's actually going to be the person kind of interview and kind of pull some of these things out. And so, man, I'm super excited. But before we do that, I want to ask this one question for you two. We'll start with you, Dena. Dena, when you think about Engage, what's the first thing that pops in your mind?
Family. That's corny, but that's literally the very first word that is associated with it in my mind.
Here we go. Pastor Jamie?
Yeah, I'll go cinnamon and row as well. Relationships is the first thing that pops in my mind. I mean, if you look at it throughout, and we'll get into it some today, just how everything just been built off of relationship from the first 18 to however many we have coming now.
Yeah. I was thinking about it today, and I've been, this whole week just kind of like, I don't get, I'm just always so focused on like where we're going and what we're doing. So to actually sit back and to like reflect on where God has brought us has been amazing. And, I think the biggest thing that gets me when I think about Engage, what comes to my mind is just like, I think it's just the word commitment. And it makes me think about just like, and again, the idea of like people commitment sold out. Like, I just think about everybody. We all just like sold out. And even people, there was always committed. People just were committed to what it is that we felt God was doing. And so that's the kind of thing that always sticks to me about Engage. And so, man, we're going to jump in. So Kara, it's your show today.
Let's do it.
So what we got, Kara? What we got?
All right. The first question that I had for you guys is, what was it like in the first stages of dreaming for Engage Church? So when y'all were meeting at Pastor Adrian's house, before this was even an option, before you had a building purchased, all of that stuff, how did you dream for Engage?
I want to ask this, Dena, go into that question. Dena, what was it like? Because this is what we got to tell people. Dena was the scribe, right? That's like she's done everything in the job. Literally, we would sit in my office at my house, and I would just start talking, like me and Dena always have, and then she would just write. Dena, I guess let's start with you. Like, when we were dreaming about this, like, what was going through your head? I mean, because like some of the stuff we put out there was wild, but like just like just what was the dreaming phase like?
I think for me, right? Like I knew Pastor Adrian from college ministry, but I hadn't had like a really strong relationship with him at the time. Like through the church plant is how I got to know him so well. So at the beginning, I was like, well, this guy, playing a church. He's older than me. Like, he knows what he's doing. Let's do it. And then as we're in it, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have no idea what we're doing. Like, as we would do things, he'd be like, yeah, that's a good idea. We should do that.
Oh my gosh.
Like, wait a minute.
So true.
I think the lesson of that is like, God was really there. Because when you're planting a church, unless you've done it before, you don't know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Like, unless you've done it before, you don't know how to do it. It's one of those things that you can't just read a book on it because every experience is different. So the dreaming phase was huge because it was, no matter how experienced Pastor Adrian was, he had never planted a church before, right? Like, he had done college ministry, he had grown these different things, businesses, all of that, but this was a whole different animal entirely. And I think we all realized that once we got into the ring and like your feet hit the ground, like, we don't know what we don't know until we don't know it, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
In the words of Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the mouth.
Right.
We got punched in the mouth a lot.
A lot. Yes, we did. Pastor Jamie, what about you, man?
So for me, wasn't really much dreaming, and I'll tell you why. Mm-hmm. So even though I grew up going to church, I very much so was not aware of what church culture was, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, I never paid attention in church, even though I was there a lot. And so similar to like Dena said, it was, I just had a relationship with you, and the person who I was close with, who I knew was a good friend, was like, hey, I want to start a church. I was like, of course I'm on board, having no idea what that entailed at all. But it was just like, I started church with him, relationship with him, good friend. And so for me, it was just like kind of just hopping along a vision that, God had placed in your heart. Mm. And I was like, I'm going to be a part. Any way I can. So
for me, and as I was thinking about this as we're preparing for Vision Night and even what I'm going to preach on Sunday, I think for me, it was always one of those things where I felt like Moses when he got to look into the promised land. And it was like, I got to look in the promised land. I'm like, yeah, I think we're going there. That's where I know where we're going.
Right.
But I have no idea how. Like, I just know, like, hey, this is kind of the direction. And here, like, some guiding things, right? You know what I mean? It was kind of like, these are guys. And that was it. There wasn't like, I mean, you had all these hopes, but we had these guiding things. And I think that was the biggest thing for me. I knew where we were going. I knew in my heart, though, I wasn't fully, I would portray as I was very confident in the fact of like, we're building, I would say all the time, man, we're building a church for the future.
Yeah.
But every year I got to see it closer and closer until when we hit this moment, even right now in the pandemic and COVID, realizing like, oh, yeah, the church that we're building is for the moment we're in right now.
Yeah.
And, but it was always, so it was that. It was just, you know, you're dreaming, you see, yes, I think what God wants to do. But then it's always anything you do, you think you know, but you fully don't know until you actually just walk in it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it's kind of like I imagine like the Israelites crossing like, you know, the Red Sea. You're like, yeah, God's leading us, but I hope this water don't come down. Like it could, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, because like we do hear stories of people suffering, you know, for the kingdom. You know what I'm saying? You're like, I hope. You know, and I just think it was one of those situations where, and so anyway, it was always just a step-by-step kind of deal. You know what I mean? And so, and kind of going from there.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I guess this is more so for Pastor Adrian. How did you choose who is going to be a part of the 18?
Oh, yeah,
man, did
question.
one, did you have a pulse? No, it was honestly, it was a good question. It was this. It was people who like what Pastor Jamie said, we have a relationship with.
Right.
It was definitely people we had a relationship with. You know, Pastor Jamie, you know, Wendy and I, you know, we had the privilege of now his wife Erica to help, you know, to disciple and lead them to Jesus in college. You know, I was one of the first campus meetings Dena ever showed up. I actually still remember it to this day, seeing her, you know, kind of, we were in the nursing building at Florida State. And she was sitting in there and I was like, and it was just, you know, Dena just has this thing like outside. I'm like, man, you know, she was very outgoing or whatever. And I remember because I actually preached there, but I wasn't, we had an athletic ministry and we had a college ministry. And so I came there in the summer just to preach. And then me and Dena had known each other for like a long time. And like I said, I always liked Dena because Dena was like one of those people to where there was a part of her that was really as best. It was just authentic. She was always who she was. Even if what Dena would say sometimes, I'm like, oh, you just said that. You know what I'm saying? Oh, you just said that. Like,
wait. The truth is at a world conference, I tracked Pastor Adrian down in the pool and said, so I heard you're starting a church because Ephraim, he had reached out to Ephraim about it and Ephraim told me. And I was like, wait a minute, your guys are not about to start a church and I'm not going to know about it. And he was like, oh, so you heard about that, right?
True story.
I was like, excuse me.
Yeah, definitely. It was a true story. And so we jumped in and we did that. And then, you know, the rest of the group were just people we had a relationship with and people who kind of wanted to see something different. People who kind of got the idea that like, man, we weren't going to build a church that was kind of that was around, you know, we wanted to be multi-ethnic, multi-generational, whatever, but more than anything else was that we wanted to be a church that really was about how are we adding value to the city that we were in. And so that was kind of it. And then that group kind of, you know, locked in and man, and God did some really cool stuff with it.
Dang. What do you guys think that you learned the most from planning a church?
Dena, you want to start?
Gosh. I mean, I was talking a little bit about this with Kara when we did that other interview for the post yesterday, but I mean, I really grew up at Engage. You know, I loved Jesus before Engage, obviously, but I grew up in my faith through Engage, taking responsibility for something bigger than just your personal walk with God. You know, like I had discipled people and done campus ministry and all of that. But I mean, I grew up in my faith at Engage. It's kind of like, when you get married, it feels like every year of maturity is like 5 years. When you have kids, every year is like 10 years. You just take on more responsibility. You grow a lot faster. Taking on a church plant and taking responsibility and feeling the weight that, hey, this isn't just something I thought would be fun to do, but like God has chosen me at this time in this place with these people to do this, really makes you grow up a lot. So I learned a whole new side of my faith through this church, just personally, and like watching the miracles of God work in the lives of others is even such a greater joy than seeing them in your own life at times,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pastor Jamie?
I think one of the things that I've learned is just seeing how God goes about making impact in people's lives, right? And how he uses people to do that. And being a part of this church plant has really opened my eyes to it. Just being so close and seeing all the people who, that I knew who came in with me, who started going to church or who started coming a little bit after and being, now 8 years down the road and, knowing where their lives are at, knowing where my life is at, even where Pastor Adrian, your life and Wendy's life is at, just how he has intended it to go, like making impact in people's lives through the people who are just committed to what he's wanting to do in their own life.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it was simple. I think the biggest thing I learned is through this church, I learned who God designed me to be. And I got to experience, I think, one of the cool things I got to experience like grace. Because, I think the group, whether if it was staff, to our original 18, they all got to watch me grow up too. And I got to watch them grow up. They got to watch me walk through as somebody who's like, naturally I express and show my emotions. They got to walk through that. We got to walk through the fact of me, just at times heartbreaking news everybody would learn or things would happen. And man, like walking through that together. We've had some moments like, as a family that, man, we walked through some really tough moments together and just experiencing the grace of God through that. That's what I've learned. It's like everybody was just like, when somebody was going through something, like we just rallied around and you just did family. It was really we got. And so I think understanding the grace and mercy of God through people like has been one of the greatest things, like one of the greatest things I've learned. Because our group was super, super gracious, man, to watch me grow. Because I really, again, what you know. Yeah. But I had to grow up and they gave me room to grow up as a leader. And so I'm really, I'm super grateful for that.
With that, do you think that the mission of Engage has stayed the same from the beginning, or has it kind of evolved and grown as you all have led and grown over the past 8 years?
I'm going to let Dena answer that one.
I honestly, it sounds like, I guess not the right answer, like, oh, have you grown? No, we haven't grown. But I don't think the mission has changed. Like, I think we've grown, but I think the mission was always like, okay, Jesus, like this is the church that you've called us to build. It looks really different than anything around us. And the mission of that engage God people culture has never changed. Now, the way we've gone about that, hold Jesus really tight, hold the gospel really tight and everything else really loose. We've gone through a bunch of changes, but I don't think the heart of Engage we've never like hit a point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but where we're like, oh, you know what? I don't think that this part of our mission is what we want to do anymore. We've never decided, oh, we wanted to do this in the beginning and we don't want to do this anymore. If anything, it's the opposite. We had so much of our mission fleshed out in the beginning and we had to pare it down to, okay, how do we start? And now we're finally able to come into more of what our mission has always been.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to kind of see. Because that was exactly what I was going to say is that, from the beginning, and why I wanted to ask Dena is because we would write it and we would talk through it. It was this idea of God, people, culture. Yeah. And it was the idea of now, we've now tweaked it more like, we exist, to see people, the idea of the connect to God, God, to connect to God, to people and to their meaningful work in the earth. Our whole heart was always like, man, we want people to take one step closer to Jesus. We want one thing to make us distinct is how we do community together. Right. We knew that would be diverse diversity. We had the different political affiliations, all that. And we wanted, and I think the biggest thing, the difference for us, I think a lot of churches was, but for us, we really structured ourselves to see people be launched to do their meaningful work. Like our heart was always about that, you know? And so I think we always just did that. And I think God constantly has like, well, I always tell people, he will always test and make you live out your values. And he's done that, you know, even in the last season, you know, with Dena, from Dena to Billy to Autumn, there was a season, you know, where there's others who like had left. And it was like this, you know, Dubois, and I mean, people who were like incredibly gifted, talented. And it was always like, man, I always realized we were just a steward. And so God, the idea of like, we're called to launch people to the world, right? Well, that sounds great until you have to launch people to the world. You know what I'm saying? Once that happens, I'm like, yeah, can I get another one on that? You know what I'm saying? But it's like, but that's what we did. So we've always stuck to it. And I think honestly, God like has blessed it. I think that's why, you know, when Billy and Autumn left, who were on staff here, it was like, then, you know, we're thinking, oh, we're going to slow down. And next thing you know, like our church literally doubled, you know, because I truly believe that when you sow, I just believe in the principle, you sow your best, you know, God just keeps giving, you know, and he just gave us even more people and greater people. And so I don't think it's changed.
Yeah. The next question that I have is, I definitely at some point in the podcast want to get to y'all's favorite memory, probably from the first year of building and just all of the things that were
I got
thrown
a bunch
at
of
you.
those. Yeah.
And give some of the people some of those fun stories. But first, are there any regrets with how you started? If you could go back 8 years ago, would you do anything differently? Your face says it all, Dena.
Pass.
Oh my gosh, there's so many things. Man, Pastor Jamie, you think of anything that we could?
Yeah,
Why is this a question?
I know.
I mean,
This is what the people want.
It's
Dena.
like everything. Like what else you would do that? Like you know, like everything.
All of it.
yeah, so I can give an answer.
Okay.
You know, with me, you know, my naiveness when it came to church planting, you know, not really knowing anything what it's about, but I was able to tell this for sure, that the one thing was sure, hey, we got it out the mud. You got it out the mud, yeah. Like literally like out of the mud.
You're so country, Jamie.
You know, I mean,
Pastor Jamie.
Someone who doesn't know anything about church planting, yeah, man, yeah. I think you should start with a little bit more than that.
Oh
but,
yeah.
But so you know, it's just one of those things where. But being able to do that, I think it definitely built, like, one of our core values that we have is our authenticity.
Yeah.
That definitely played a role into us being able to be authentic, being able to really lean into God and say, hey, what is it that you know, are calling this church towards, and being able to just walk that path. So,
yeah.
That's I mean, that's a good point. I definitely would say that. I mean, you know, it's one of those things with like going back on it, you're like, yeah, maybe not like, we weren't talking about that much more money, but more than what we started with. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you look at it, you're like, I mean, it really is. I mean, just for you guys who are listening, I mean, the average church plant, you know, I mean, again, the first 3 years is between like $300,000 to $1 million, right? I mean, most people start with a couple $100,000. They start there. Yeah. Like we started with 10 grand. And it was like, I mean, we really was. I mean, like, and it was just, but like, we didn't know, like, it was just, we didn't know it's what we knew.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, like, everybody had another job.
Yeah.
Like, the pastor had another job.
That's
like,
you know, it's like, I'm like, I want to be bivocational. I want to be bivocational. And I'm like, all right. Then when you're in it, you're like, all right, well, that means, so people look at you, well, what are you doing? I'm like, we all got to do it. You know, like, I'm going to work like you going to work tomorrow. Like, who got them slides? I don't know. Who does have those slides for Sunday? Hey, I'm talking about it. Oh yeah. And so I mean, I just think maybe like I'm with Pastor Jamie. Maybe we start with a little bit more, but I also think now it's what's made us who we are. I've been thinking about this. A lot of our journey has been, you know, in Exodus 35, God gave us the scripture. I've been thinking about the idea of like his presence. We said that we don't want to go anywhere unless his presence really marks us. And the thing about it is that the Israel, you know, of all things Moses could have said that made them be different. It could be money. It could have been power. It's like, no, I want your presence to mark us. I really feel like Engage has followed that kind of that idea of the Israelites, because what I've been thinking about is like our journey. Like our journey was like the Israelites in the sense of this, like we're heading somewhere, but God had to provide for us like every step. Mm-hmm. So I think some of the reasons why God did that is he built this level of faith in us because of the fact that there were just seasons where, I mean, almost all the seasons were like, man, God, you have to show up. You know, you have to show up. You have to provide. Like, it wasn't like this. Like, we didn't have like, you know, it was like every day you had to wake up like, all right, I hope he pours down manna. You know what I mean? It wasn't like we had this like these coffers of like cash sitting in the bank or just a bunch of people. Like, we just didn't have it. But what it taught us, I think it was all the preparation, kind of even our theme this year, A Moment to a Movement, is preparing us so that when God does pour those things out, when God does do those things, we actually know how to handle it. We're always going to be people. It's just too much in our DNA, like not to get it out the mud. Like, this is who we are. Like, we're going to, you know, we may have more, but we're always going to figure a way to make sure, hey, is this making the most sense? You know what I mean? Because I think sometimes in church world, it is just, you know, the natural thing in anything, church world, any industry, just throw money at it. Right. You know, versus like, no, like I think innovation happens when there's scarcity. And so I think it's the way God developed. So like, I wish we had more, but then on the other side of me, I'm glad we didn't.
You see the positives of that.
Because I know how he made, that's what he did. Like, that's like, I think that was our journey. You know what I'm saying? Though, yeah, you wish you didn't have to go through it, but I think it's just our journey, you know? And, you know, like I said, right now I always laugh with our elders. Like, I'm sitting there every time I look, like right now, just at what God has done in our church. And every time, you know, Pastor Jamie being our financial architect, I look at the numbers. I'm like, I don't even know how to act. I'm like, yo, what we doing? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, you know, I guess like when I'm like that kid, like, yo, spend it before we lose it. You know what I'm saying? You know, and so, but no, that was it.
I know that you're going to talk more about this at our worship night and vision night, but for the people that may not know, biblically, number 8 is new beginnings. But what really made you think that year 8 was going to start our movement as a church?
You know what? I didn't. What I knew last year, pre-COVID and everything like that, around November, I felt the Lord speak to me and say, everything that I've done in your life has prepared for this moment. Pastor Jamie and his wife Erica both had like 2 or 3 very significant dreams about my life. And a lot of it like lined up to, I mean, literally one of the dreams was like all the dreams had shoes in there. So if you don't know, I'm a sneakerhead. So I got really worried when he started talking about it. I was like, yo, man, he's like, you know, one of the shoes was washing away. I was more worried about, I was like, oh no. I was like, which ones? I was like, please not, you know, please not watch the Thrones. You know what I'm saying? Like, leave them, let those be watch that. But it was one of those situations where the whole thing was like, and even one of the things that Pastor Jamie heard in the dreams I did, like I'm changing his shoes and so he had those, and then, you know, and he had those before, and then I kind of had this where I felt God speak this, but then last year was year 7. It was like, man, it's the idea of rest, right? And this idea of residing. We didn't know what was going to happen with COVID.
Right.
And now it's like, oh, but as COVID was going on, it was one of those situations to where besides us going online, a lot of churches had to pivot, cut staff, put people on furlough, do this. Like going back to what Pastor James said earlier, I mean, we just got out the mud so much. It's like, oh yeah, like we just keep it moving. And matter of fact, I think that's what's happening. And then it's just years gone on. It's just more and more been inside of God's like, no, like coming up, like it's going from a moment to a movement. You know, we're doing something now. It's no longer just like I've built this whole thing up for this next step. I've built you guys for this point. So I didn't know from the beginning, like, hey, year 8's going to be this way. I just have just kind of watched, and I just look at kind of just the guideposts and signs, and I really feel like this is what God is doing. And I don't have any idea what that looks like. I just have learned a long time ago, I don't try to do that, because all you're going to do is get disappointed if you put the way God should do it. Just like our church, I knew where God was taking us. I never knew the journey of what we would go in this and this and this place. And I had no idea, but where we're at right now, did I know God was going to take us here? I knew the destination, this next phase, but I didn't know when. I didn't know how we're going to get there. And I think that's what's super important principles. I like so many times people, God will, hey, he's doing this in my life. But what we'll do is we'll project what we want, how we want him to do it. And it's never that. You know, it's just always, man, what is he doing? And ultimately, man, we just follow, you know, and honestly. And that's that we said, man, God is literally, it's been like the cloud. We don't want to go unless you're, and so, all right, we're going here. Okay, God, you're in this. Okay. And that's how we'll always be. And I think, you know, this next phase will be a little bit different.
Yeah. So coming from our movement and bringing it back to the moment, what are some of y'all's favorite moments or memories that you have from the beginning of Engage?
I want to start with this one. One of my favorite moments where I literally was like, I was excited and angry all in one moment. This has to do with Dena's husband.
Oh gosh.
This has to do with Austin. And this is what it was. It was the fact of, if you guys know, when we first started Engage, right? It was that, man, we were just with worship. We were just trying. Yeah, Dena's got, if you guys are just listening to this versus watching it, Dena's got really excited because she remembers this. And so all of a sudden, Austin, her husband, again, everybody knows Austin, if you've been around, you know Austin, again, incredible musician, great voice, all this. Well, here's the thing.
Real cute.
I ain't saying all that. Nah, you know what I'm saying? That's between y'all. But here's the thing. And so all of a sudden, Austin, he was playing keys for us. So, I mean, I knew he was a good musician or whatever. Like, oh, man, I'm so thankful, whatever. So we were struggling, though, with vocals and things like that. And that's being very generous. And so here's the deal, though. All of a sudden, one day, it's kind of like, I felt like the movies, I felt like it was like Sister Act 2. You know what I'm saying? It was like Sister Act 2 when you find out Lauryn Hill can sing. All of a sudden, I'm walking out there and I hear Dubois, who he's in there, and Dubois he kind of just joined. He was singing, so he was kind of helping us. Then all of a sudden, I hear another voice, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's incredible!" And I'm like, "Did Dubois change the pitch of his voice?" Like, I was trying to figure it out. I walk around.
How is Dubois doing this?
I know. I walk around the corner, and it's stinking Austin in there, sounding like John Legend. And I literally, in a moment, had never had this feeling of excitement and want to smack a grown man in his face to realize, like, listen, you see us up here struggling every week. It's like having Kobe on the bench. He was like, oh, y'all can hoop. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I'll never get that moment. But it was like one of those moments, though, once it happened, like, just how God provided. Because, like, we were struggling. Then next thing you know, it's like in a moment, it was like Dubois, Austin, Mackenzie. I mean, all of a sudden, we went from man, like struggling to next thing you know, it's like, man, we had like the Monstars up there. You know what I'm saying? And it was just like, and so anyway, that was kind of one of my favorite moments. And I remember, I'll never forget it, walking straight down the hallway, just looking in. And I wish I would have got my face recorded, because it was like excitement and anger all in one face. So, Dena, what about you?
Favorite moments? They're highlights. Black Santa, for sure.
Yeah, shout out to man. Shout out to.
I like the bad moments too, but okay, some more good ones. Hold on. So the wedding, the Easter wedding at your house in the pool, that was nice.
Yes, yep. Yeah. So anybody doesn't know, we had a couple literally give their life. I mean, they had gotten separated, got their life back, got it to Jesus, baptized them that day, and then got out of the water, and we married them.
Wow.
Yeah, it was wild. It was crazy.
That was a good day. I mean, their highlights, they're more so not like how Pastor Adrian said, like they're very specific people's stories highlights, you know, like, so I don't want to go there, but I remember just specific breakthroughs in that first year. I know the Acres have shared their story, but when we did that whole, the heartbreak, I forget what did we call it? It was something in heartbreak or scars and stories, all the scars and stories moments. I mean, those were some powerful first year things to see as a church that were just mind blowing, heart exploding. Like, wow, God, look at what you're already doing. So,
yeah. Pastor Jamie, what about you?
Yeah, I would say, so I'll go with more of like a story that happened, kind of similar to yours, that happened at Young Actors Theater. And so, you know, like I said, I did grow up going to church. And so I served on the usher board, you know, at church. So I, you know, open up the door or stand on the wall, pass around the collection plate, things like that. So obviously being naive, but being a part of church plant, that's what I just hopped into. Okay, you know, like what I know to do, right? And so there was one Sunday, service is going on, and someone's inside praying, and I'm outside in the lobby. And so the way Young Actors Theater is set up, there's a lobby when you come in, and then the sanctuary entrance doors are to the left. And so I'm outside the sanctuary in the lobby, you know, open up the door, but the doors are closed because service is going.
Right.
And for some reason, you were outside of service, like you were in the bathroom or something. And so people that come in, but I have them held right there in the lobby because there's praying, right? So, and so if you don't know by now, Southern Black Baptists, this is what they do, right? Like you don't interrupt the service at certain points in the service. And so this is just naturally coming out.
That's what they should have had. They should have had a deacon board at the Capitol. Would have got nobody would have got in. If you'd had a black deacon board and ushers at the Capitol, they would have not got in. You are not getting in right there. You know what I'm saying?
And then, so it's like 2 or 3 people in the lobby right there, and then Pastor Adrian walks around the corner. And he doesn't say this in the moment, but he just kind of like gestures like, hey, go ahead and open up the door and go in. And I opened up the door and everybody go in. And afterwards, I don't know if you remember, you come to me and you're like, hey, man, what are you doing? like, why would you let the people in? I was like, that's just what you do. I know you're like, no, you can let them in there. So I was like, okay. So, but it was so hilarious to me because it was like, oh, yeah, this is kind of different than what I'm used to. Like, it's not going to be the same.
Man. Dude, listen, I think one of the coolest stories, I would say this, and that lately that happened was, I think it was about a year ago. It was right November a year ago of like, kind of, we just saw, I mean, so many people come to faith and all that. And yeah, it was on Mondays at Midtown, and I literally stood up and it just flew out of my mouth. I'm like, hey, somebody walked in this door, and when you got out your car, you said that if I'm not gonna, that if God doesn't show up tonight, I'm gonna kill myself.
Yep.
And then I leave. I was so discouraged after the sermon for whatever reason. I walk out, I go home. Next thing I get a call from Pastor Derek. I don't even listen to the message of the morning. He's like, hey, we're never gonna believe this, but there's a guy who literally was just pacing outside, and he was so discombobulated. And I asked him what's going on. He's like, the guy he had prayed for at the end about killing himself, that was me. And then that guy responded, and the fact that he got in basic training and stuff like that, and, just stories like that, stories right now, you guys will be hearing one coming up with Wes. I mean, again, literally, kind of Antifa, kind of that kind of vein, and God got a radical hold of his life. I mean, it is just, I think those are the moments that we got a lot, like Dena said, it's the stories of life change.
Yeah.
And honestly, the stories I love, there's like life change, and it's the stories of like stuff we did in the moment where we're like, what are we going to do? Like, I love the story, like the fact I couldn't stay in the moment that the power went out on Easter.
Yes.
And we're like, and the fact that we had to move all the chairs outside, and people literally thought we did it on purpose. They're like, oh man, that's a sunrise service. I'm like, yeah, it is. Like,
but when you're used to operating like that, like something happens, you adapt quickly. Even just the stuff that's not happening, like a power outage. But Pastor Adrian, before we started the service, originally the services were supposed to be in the gym in the back of his house. And like 2 weeks before we started, he's like, what do you think about moving it? I was like, okay, cool. Like, what?
Yeah, what do we think about moving? I mean, I'm saying, for people who don't know, we literally were going to move everything in the gym that's at our house, and the guy goes in there and says, hey, acoustically, this is going to be a nightmare. You can't do it in here. And we're like, and I literally like, oh, well, that was the whole plan. And, next thing you know, I think that's just how I'm built. Once you realize that, I think a lot of our team we're like, okay, where do we go from here?
Right.
And man, and the guy literally mentioned, hey, what about that young actor? He's like, the young actor, I know sometimes like churches rent. I'm like, oh, really? I call up, and literally that day, the guy who, he's like, hey, yeah. He's like, man, honestly, we were getting ready to put it on Craigslist because we're looking for a church to rent it. Like, he's like, we're putting it on there this afternoon. And I was like, hold up. Don't put it on there. I'm on my way. I mean, literally, you know what I'm saying? Hey, I felt like, you know what I'm saying? I felt like Marcus Burnett and Bad Boys 2. I'm on the way. And so we go straight down there, and we see it. Like, no, don't do that. And we got it. And man, and that quick, everything flipped and changed. But those are the stories you don't like, but it develops
in the moment.
you.
Right.
In the moment, you don't like them. You're like, what is going on? But you know what? But I tell people, that's the stuff you read about in the Bible. That's stuff when you read scripture, right? We have the end result. But man, when you're reading the Bible and you're like, I mean, just you're Elijah and you're like, okay, I'm about to go against like the spiritual like rulers at that moment of Baal worship. And you're just like, all right, hey, go see if your God showed up, see if mine will show up. And literally what you're believing God's going to like send a meteorite from heaven
Yeah.
on some wet wood, which is a powerful part of that story is the fact there's a drought too. So if this don't work, people are literally going to kill you because like there was no water and you tell them to put the water on the wood and there's not enough water for God to do this. You're like, you better hope he shows up.
Right.
That, we hear the story, oh, look at Elijah's face. I'm like, I can't imagine being Elijah in that moment. Like, but those are the stories. And I think if you never put yourself in a position to allow God to move, you won't ever see the goodness of God. Like you don't really understand the goodness of God until you're in a situation where you have to experience the goodness of God.
Right.
Yeah,
So.
everyone wants to see a miracle, right? But you don't ever want to be in the position to need one.
Nope.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that I've developed in as a part of Engage is the ability to problem solve. And I think that that's one of the things that we teach our people really well.
Yeah.
That's
Just
life.
Right.
It is.
Right. Just a couple more questions. For those that may not know, we're a part of a collection of churches called Every Nation. So I just wanted y'all to talk a little bit about your experience with Every Nation and how we became a part of their movement as a church as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've been a part. I mean, all of us, again, got born again in the Every Nation movement. This is all I've ever known. I'm like, Pastor, I didn't grow up in church. So when I got saved, I got, saved here. And the church I was a part of was a part of a church group of church called Morning Star. Then it moved into Every Nation. It's all I've ever known. And the reason why we're a part of Every Nation, I mean, really with the mission of campus ministry, church planning, and and world missions is that, and that's kind of really our heart. But more than anything else, too, I tell people the thing that, I have the privilege of working with a lot of other different churches and different people in mega churches and whatever is honestly, man, that what we have in Every Nation, a lot of people don't have. And it's what Pastor Jamie said. It's like relationship. Like, my best friends in the world are part of this movement. Right. I met them in it. You know what I'm saying? Again, a lot of people who are part of Engage here, like they've met their best friends, they've met, their spouses and others. And so that's what it is. So at the end of the day, people ask, why am I a part? Is because it's family. We're not perfect. We got our sets of issues. But every family has a set of issues. Right. But what I do know is that we do it from a relational standpoint, and I'm super, super grateful.
Last question of the pod. What are y'all looking forward to most in the next 8 years? I know, Dena, you're not here, but what do you want to see from the sidelines?
A South Florida church plant. Let's go. That's an easy one. That was a softball. I'm not here, so you come here, right?
Right.
Let's see it.
All right. Well, anybody right now, if you have it in your heart to want to go to South Florida, you're going to be hearing a little bit more about what we're doing. Hey, let us know. You know what I'm saying? Again,
ready.
It's going to be on and popping down there in South Florida. You know what I'm saying? Like with Dena leading, I got to make sure we got, let me try to think who I got to send. I got to send, Bishop Gray down there, Bishop Donald Gray down there. I got Bishop Donald and
Well, that's the whole church plant team right there. Just send him with his kids, and we're good.
Shout out to the Grays. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to the Grays with the Mormon family. Oh man!
But honestly, until you guys get down here, I'd love to see some of that in-house worship music that we kind of started dreaming about. I'd love to hear some Engage worship music. I'm ready for it.
Hey, here we go. All right. Pastor Jamie, what about you?
I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is kind of something that's already happening already, but continuing to see it is just seeing people be launched out. Get to see them, see what God's calling them to, knowing, the growth they've had here, going to them, seeing them launched out, seeing them grow, and getting to talk to them when they come back and visit. Yeah. And just being able to tell, man, like, this is what God has been doing in their life, and just seeing, God's goodness and his faithfulness through just the people who've been launched out in their growth and everything like that. So,
yeah. For me, it's simple. It's kind of on the lines of, kind of what both of you guys have said. I think that we're entering this idea of a movement, and the idea of the movement, it's always simply been this for us. It's been the fact of these ideas of innovative reconcilers, and seeing those people established and seeing them launch into the world. In 8 years from now, what I would love to be able to say and see is that in almost every industry in almost every industry that's out there, whether it's sports, if it's finance, if it's in the idea of retail, if it's in fashion, I mean, whatever, music, that we can say that we have somebody from Engage in those industries.
Yeah.
Yep.
That are committed to Jesus.
Yep.
That are holy and they're set apart, but they're really good at what they do.
Yeah.
They're really good at what they do. They are like Daniel. They are like Daniel. They're like Esther. They're like people who've been sent to a place to honor God, but also in honoring God, man, they add real value. I think that's the world we're living in. I think that's what we're entering. I think with all this stuff, all COVID and quarantine was just the accelerator in the beginning of what God's doing. I think it'll start to look more, like you guys have heard me say, it'll look more and more like a winter season. But I'm reminded of Jeremiah 17 that even in Babylon, that he said if they remain close to him and planted to him, that they would flourish. And so what I really believe that's going to be the greatest, I think what leads to revival is this idea of reformation. I believe as people are launched and add value, I think people are going to begin to be like how Nebuchadnezzar was, about testifying about the God of Daniel. And I look forward to people saying that in the future. Who's this, who is this God that Dena serves? Who's this God that Jamie serves? Who's this God that that Eric serves? Who's this God that Billy serves? Who's this God that cares? And that people, and then they could testify about that. I think that so many times today it's been people preaching and leading that way versus the value add and saying, man, we care about humanity and about humans flourishing. And as we allow humans to flourish, say, why do you want humans to flourish? It's like, man, because our God came to die for us to allow us to flourish, and we just know and tell the story. And so that's what I look forward to. I look forward to there being, the next 8 years, I look forward to being, thousands of innovative reconcilers, all across the world. And I honestly, and I hope what it does is sparks a movement for other people, not to be like us, but honestly to be who God's called them to be. Right. I think that's the most important thing. If I could say that, there's so many important values we have, but the key value I think the value that's the most important here at Engage, the two most important values are authenticity and spiritual family. Yeah. And I think this idea of authenticity, of self-awareness, resilience, remain self-aware, that I really want to see churches and other people really become who God's called them to be. I think the days of people just trying to take a model and doing that, it's not going to work. I think where God's breathing life on is people being who they are. So for us, we're bivocational. For others, it may be a traditional model. For others, man, it may be a nonprofit and they're doing that and reaching people from there. Yeah. I just think there's going to be, but I think when those who are truly being who they are and they're aware of that, I think God's going to bless it. And I hope that we're just we're just a part, and that people can come across the world to come here and says, what is it that we do? And us not tell them do this, but us help them discover what's inside of them and send them back. That's what we're super, super passionate about. And hopefully as well, we got church plants and things like that. Hopefully in 8 years we'll have one in South Florida. You know what I'm saying? And so looking forward to that. So, but guys, hey, I really appreciate that. For those who are listening, again, you're going to hear us. Why we talk about this is because, when I read the Bible, it wasn't only just the Torah that was written down, but there was also like the oral Torah that was there. They told the story, and it's because the oral Torah brought the culture. There was what was written and what you read, but then there's a part of that brought the culture. And why we tell these stories is not because we're just, yes, it's fun to reminisce, it's to do that, but it's to always keep the culture, because the more and more time goes, the more and more life, pain, society pressure will try to erode the culture. Yeah. It's not just what we write on paper, but it's actually a culture. When you walk in and Engage, it's like, man, it's just, you can't, some of the stuff, we can point to it, but when you walk in, it's like, well, what is this? Like, you just can't, some of you can't explain, you just have to be in it. Like, it's just a culture. And the culture is what makes us. And I think the way you consistently pass culture down is by constantly telling the story. It's a reminding of the history of how faithful God has been. And so why I'm so full of faith, even though in the world today, it's seeming to go mad, is because I just have seen how God's been so incredibly faithful with little. And so now, I feel like when we're playing with house money. Now it's like, I feel like we've been in Vegas and we're like, yo, we already, we're way farther. I thought we already hit a lick. Now I was like, yo, I'm just playing with house money. Now I'm just putting all my chips in. I'm betting heavy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? We playing craps right now. I'm out there. I got about 5,000 on a hard 8 right now.
Hey, I'm a finance architect. You got a rope. We got a good You got a good bit of rope on you.
Got a little bit of rope
Go
now,
ahead,
don't we?
Go ahead. Right.
Oh man, you know what's funny as we come to close? What I really do, it does break my heart though, is because Dena, Billy, Autumn, they were on the grind in the mud. We didn't have nothing. Man, they be hearing stories about what we doing right now. They're like, "Yo, man, it's like your first child, right?" Like Jalen, I feel bad for Jalen. We treated Jalen like he was an inmate. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Peyton runs around like, man, she's running around just wide open. They're like, Jalen listens to me sometimes like, you never spank her. He's like, I feel like, like Jalen, sometimes Jalen be making up stuff. It's like, matter of fact, you was spanking me like yesterday. I'm like, dog, it's like, but again, it's one of those situations when you're on the beginning of it, you're like, man, but yeah, I feel bad because sometimes I want to bring them back up here and like, hey, come enjoy this, you know what I mean? Because they help build it, you know what I'm saying?
Listen, like, I'm happy for you guys. When I was there, I remember Pastor Jamie was trying to get us on that 1-ply toilet paper. So you enjoy the bounty, okay?
Hey, man.
Nobody want that thick toilet paper on them, man.
No one's that Scott Costco brand 500 rolls for $1 toilet paper.
Exactly.
Hey, man. We still listen. This is one thing about it, Engage. Hey, we are going to always keep it. This is always up. We always gonna keep it in the mud. You know what I'm saying? But we gonna shine a little bit though. We gonna shine a little bit. So.
Two-ply toilet paper.
Two-ply now. We living that high life right now. You know what I'm saying? Oh man. So anyway, well, guys, hey, I hope you enjoy it. And again, for you guys who are listening, we have people who are a part of our community, those who aren't a part of our community. What I hope more than anything else these podcasts do is just bring it to you in a real life sense. And the fact that if you're a part of our engaged family, whether if it's physical location or online location, is that you're a part of the story. And you have your story that you can tell, that you're a part of this history and the culture of what God's doing here. And so, well, guys, hey, we appreciate you being here with us here on Street Theology. And we look forward to seeing you this upcoming Friday or Sunday.